It's Mark and Pete.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is the show dedicated to religion, politics and business. This week we have a special edition. The Olympics. Is Brazil going nuts? Well, Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark will be talking about all of the issues around the Olympic Games. Well, on the 5th of August, the Olympic Games will open its ceremony, and we will see many athletes across the world competing for gold, silver and bronze. Well, there's a lot to see, but it doesn't come without its controversy. There's many people will state that Brazil itself is going through many troubled times, not just its economy. We've seen issues such as the Zika virus. We've also seen controversy in its own parliament. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Also, there's crime. Will that affect the Olympic Games? But when we actually talk about the politics around the Olympics, let's now turn to the actual games itself. Well, I know there's a man who's been limbering up, hosing himself down, and he's got his laces tied. So, Clergyman Pete, what do you think about holding the Olympic Games in Brazil?
Yes, of course, that's just my usual morning preparation for the day. But I think that to borrow from a well-known play, Charlie's Aunt, I would say that it's absolutely nuts to hold it there. It's the wrong time to hold it there. That's my strapline. I'm saying it's the wrong time to hold it there. It's of course not wrong to hold it in Brazil per se. Brazil has a lot to offer, certainly in terms of facilities, in terms of the culture, being exposed to a wider audience around the world. That would be wonderful because of the vibrant culture there. But it's not the right time to do it because of the difficulties you mentioned in your intro and more.
Yes. Well, I think that we're going to tackle a lot of these, and we'll go through them one by one. But before we do so, I'm going to read out a little poem that might set the scene. This is a poem called Ever-Decreasing Circles. Oh, the Olympic ideal has been wrangled. Can the 5 rings ever be untangled? Perhaps the faster, higher, stronger drugs are making sportsmen appear like mugs, jumping through a lengthy legal loophole and making tracks with damage control. In first place, wrestling with their morals, is the IOC resting on their laurels. In second place, pushing off beta blockers, come the super cheats and other shockers. In third place, and now throwing in the towel, is the viewing public that watch and scowl. Now leaping to the game's ultimate conclusion, should fraudsters be handed a lifetime exclusion? So, as leading nations listen to their victory tune, perhaps it's justice that takes the wooden spoon. Well, as we've seen, there's been a lot of controversy about doping. Yes, so as we've seen, that some of the athletes, particularly with a lot of focus on the Russian team, have been exposed for perhaps some misgivings. We've seen also what was often been described as state doping schemes, where essentially in past Olympics, Russians have been actually discovered to be cheating. They've been taking drugs to enhance performance. And so what has happened over certainly the last few months building up to the Olympic Games, criticism that the IOC hasn't acted quick enough. In fact, what it has done is it's basically delegated the responsibility to a lot of the individual sports federations. Now, we know that some athletes have been banned, but should there have been a blanket ban on the Russian athletes? What's your opinion?
Well, let me give you a considered opinion. I do think that Russia and the Soviet Union before it have been guilty of trying to use the Olympics for propaganda purposes and so wanting their athletes to win at any cost, and having organised doping regime organised from the top down, from the government down, getting people to take drugs. It's one of those open secrets that people seem to have always known, and it came to light. So there is some there was some justification to say, well, with that going on, you should ban all the athletes coming from that country. However, I think it sends a better message to say, no, what we're going to do is actually test everyone the same, and those who fall short are banned, because then in terms of giving credibility to the decision and credibility to the sport, we say, well, everyone's treated the same. We weren't anti-Russian, we weren't anti all that. So bringing politics into it as well, not wanting to seem unfair, I think means that the position they've taken is broadly correct. That's my view. What's yours?
Yes. Well, I think that from my opinion, I have always been, on behalf of athletes, rather disappointed when there is a blanket ban. So if we cast our minds back, particularly to the 1980 and the 1984 Olympics, both were marred by political issues. Yes, there were definitely controversies over cheats, perhaps, but when politics and sport mix, it's not a good cocktail. And when we come to the 2016 Olympic Games, I would be extremely concerned that a blanket ban would effectively eliminate those who have integrity, those people, those athletes in whichever chosen sport. Not being able to actually compete would be a disaster. I mean, bearing in mind that most athletes in their sporting career possibly will only have 2 or 3 chances to actually compete in the games, to be banned would be extremely damaging. I do understand that you've also got to take out a stance on this, because interestingly, as my poem brought out, if you caught it, that the actual motto of the Olympic Games is faster, higher, stronger.
Yes.
Effectively, you want people to get faster, to break records. You want them to jump higher, and you want them to be stronger. But you want a level playing field. But I think that banning individuals, I have no problem with. But I do have a problem when you eliminate a nation. I think an Olympic Games without Russia doesn't seem like a full Olympic Games. But that's just only my opinion. And I do understand those who say, no, you've got to send out a signal. What I do think, though, is that it's almost certain, as a lot of experts will say, that there will be some cheats that filter through the system.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. What does seem to be quite surprising is keeping pace with science, because it seems that many athletes, particularly those unscrupulous ones, seem to find new ways of going under the radar and being able to avoid any sort of doping screening system. So I wonder what will come from the 2016 Olympics.
Yeah, sure. Now, I think that, sorry to butt in there, but we normally put a bit from the Bible in each week, trying to get some input from Scripture. And I think that this verse from Scripture does make a point to this, although it makes a wider point as well. It's from 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. It says this: an athlete is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules. Now, this was used as an example to talk about how you needed to obey God's rules or God's standards in order, to be rewarded by God in the end, that He was calling you to a holy life, effectively. But the assumption there, without which it makes no sense, is that an athlete is not crowned and should not win unless they compete according to the rules. This was seen as something that's an underlying assumption. Of course, that is true. And so I think we can take this to mean that it's very, very important that we have integrity in sport. Otherwise, we lose the whole point of it, unless we have integrity. Now, unless you're going to go down the route of having a druggies Olympics, like you're allowed to take drugs and it's encouraged, which would be like a competition between the various different pharmaceutical companies to see which one can produce the best super athlete. Unless you're going to go down that route, which I advise against, because you're going to destroy a lot of human beings in the process, you've got to have these drugs which enhance the performance banned, and you just have to keep trying to get in the way, but to root them out. But the mistake I think made by people like the Russian government and the Soviet government before them, and other countries, thinking that if we have our athletes win, it's going to show how great a country we are. just doesn't work if they're then found out to have cheated. That gives a complete opposite impression of you as a country. So it's not worth the risk. Reputation management is a whole industry these days. They need to manage their own reputation better and make sure that there aren't any cheats.
Well, indeed. Now, when we talk about holding the Olympics in Brazil, it's not just about the athletes themselves. What we've also seen are the other concerns. For example, the Zika virus, which has certainly blighted the country and has concern for many people, whether it's tourists as well as the athletes and, of course, those who are putting the Olympic Games together. So I think many people are aware now that essentially this is a virus which has infected thousands of babies born with underdeveloped brains. And as we've already seen, there are some athletes who have decided not to go. And this is a brave decision because although they certainly have recognized that some efforts have been made to eradicate Zika, it will certainly be there when the games start and throughout the event and post the event. So I guess the question there from a health point of view is, should the Olympic Games have gone ahead or could they have been delayed? Yes. What do you think?
Yes, well, I think we're moving into the section now where we justify the title of this episode, that it's nuts, and what I said at the start of the episode about it being nuts to hold it there at this time. Yes, the Zika virus has been a problem. It's recognised as being a problem, and that needs to be addressed before we have so many young people going to compete there. And, just to be blunt about it for the moment, there's been a sex ban for tourists, because of the Zika virus. Lots of young people being mixed together. I'm just saying it could happen. That's maybe I'm being naive, but I understood that young people enjoyed that sort of thing. But it's just irresponsible to bring in so many people when there's still that health issue. But more than that, I would say that there's so many other issues in Brazil that need sorting out as well. There's the problem with drug crime. I'm not talking about performance-enhancing drugs. I'm talking about the opposite sort of drugs, which make you perform worse, possibly.
Street drugs.
Yeah. I'm talking about recreational drugs. Yeah. And I would say, that because they really haven't sorted that out. I mean, a few years ago, I think it was 2012, the Brazilian government said they was spending $2 billion, the equivalent, on tackling the drug crime issue, and it appears to have had very little effect. So they're not sorting that out. Should they then have what's really a reward given to a country, to host the Olympics? Should they be given that when they haven't really made these efforts that they said they would to do something about the drug crime? Or if they have made those efforts, they haven't been successful. That's where the question is it nuts to send it there? Not just because of the health risk from a Zika virus, but the risks of people being peddled drugs, and also a country being rewarded when it hasn't sorted out its drug crime problem.
Well, certainly crime is a major concern for tourists and athletes themselves. There is also another major issue, as was it nuts to award the Olympic Games to Brazil, which is about the economy. Quite simply, there has been a lot of concern about the way that the government has unfolded in the last few years. We've seen that there have been suspensions of the President Dilma Rousseff through impeachment issues, and also at the same time scandals over the funds and issues with Petrobras. This is the oil and gas company, a major employer in the region. Clearly, the oil and gas industry has struggled, but economically, the country is certainly under some great pressure. So with that, and also with the responsibility of running an Olympic Games, is this actually going to leave Brazil with more financial problems, bearing in mind that it costs a great deal of money to hold an Olympic Games?
Yeah.
So just purely from an economic point of view, was it right?
Yeah, well, I think that it was. I think that we've seen that it's possible to hold Olympic Games and by judicious use of sponsorship, etc., actually make money out of them. But the infrastructure that you need to put in is very, very expensive. Maybe you can actually run the games at a profit, but the infrastructure that needs to put in, if you're not ready for that huge amount of money that needs to be put in for that, because your economy is struggling, you're just making it worse. And then on top of that, going back to reputation management, if it all goes wrong, if in fact the predictions that have been made that the swimmers are going to end up swimming through sludge, if you go swimming, keep your mouths closed, people have been told.
Yeah,
to keep out the diarrhea from going into your mouth. Now, as to whether that's going to end up being true or not, I don't know. But the point that I'm making is, as soon as something does go wrong, because there's this expectation that they're not ready to host them, and as soon as something goes wrong, it's going to really dint their reputation. So far be it from being something that enhances their reputation and their standing in the world, and have the opposite effect. So all in all, they do seem to have been crazy to take this on.
Yes. Well, of course, we talked about a lot of serious issues, but I think we should also mention something else, which obviously is probably something that will concern many people, which is, of course, it's alleged by a lot of the athletes that you cannot access Pokemon Go in the athletes' village. Now, surely that's enough reason to not go at all.
I'm shocked. I'm sorry, I'm shocked. Yeah, I didn't realise that was the case. I think that's possibly a human rights violation right there.
So, well, I think we've probably come to the conclusion then that possibly we think that it was complete nuts to hold the Olympic Games in Brazil. Well, listeners, what do you think? I mean, do you think that it was right by the IOC to actually say, well, no, we need to expand our horizons, give Brazil the opportunity? Maybe at the time when they made the decision, they thought that these issues could easily be overcome. But we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line on markandpete.com and let us know your thoughts. We'll certainly be cheering our nation along, wherever you may be, I'm sure, hoping that your nation will cleanly, fairly salute the flag when they win the gold medals in their chosen professions and sport. So, from Clergyman Pete and Businessman Mark, join us again next time for more colourful conversations.